Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you, Tiffany and Darius. Good morning. Good morning. Preaching today. So we have been exploring masculine energy this month, the month of June, the divine masculine, and particularly how it can positively show up in the world. And one of the qualities of the masculine, the divine masculine, is bringing things into manifestation and taking action. So we've been exploring that topic in different ways. Kelly and Michael Bogar spoke this month and shared with us many different ideas about taking action and about fatherhood. And I have asked the men's group if they would like to put forth some representatives from their group to talk about what it is to be a man today in our world and in this culture. And so 4 of the members of our men's group have graciously agreed to take on this topic. And so what I want to do is I want to introduce them each individually right now, and then we'll move into their talks. And so we begin I'm doing the intro right now. So Kerry, if you'd stand up, this is Kerry McKenna, and he's going to be speaking to us about the joy of manhood. Kerry is from Chicago, and he was very active at Unity of Chicago as well as here. And he and his wife Diane share 4 children and 5 grandchildren. Then we'll be followed by our own Jeffry Myers. And he is going to speak about, as a man, answering my respective calling. Jeffry has been in the New Thought movement for 3 decades. He's one of the original founders of the Men's Fellowship Group, and we invite you to join that. If you're, you saw the stuff on the retreat during the announcements, and it would be a great thing to join. Jeffry is an artist, and his calling is to create something that no one else has thought of. That will be followed by Carl Wostwin. Carl grew up in the Midwest, and he's traveled in Europe, Middle East, and India in his 20s, and he was a founder, gardener, coordinator, and educator at Seattle Tilth Association from 77 to 86. For 24 years, he designed and managed waste prevention, composting, and public outreach programs for the city of Seattle. He is now retired, and he likes to hike, bike, garden, read, and write poetry. And he is married to Marcia Rattan, and they have a wonderful son named Sam who travels. And he's going to be sharing us a poem on being a father. So we welcome Carl and Joseph Zahn. We welcome Joseph Zahn. Joseph will be speaking about his father, an honorable man, a few important things I learned from my father about being. After a nomadic childhood where he traveled around the country with his parents and 8 siblings, Joseph found a home in the Seattle area. He values and actively nurtures the comfort and stability of family and longtime friends, and he is now a man of leisure, having retired from dual careers of psychologist and postman. You might say he was a man of letters. In multiple domains, Joseph now finds meaning and purpose through his various volunteer activities and time spent with his family, pursuing music, sports, spiritual exploration, and world traveling. And he has been with his lovely wife, Carol, for 38 years. Amazing. All right. So without further ado, let's invite Kerry McKenna. Join me in welcoming Kerry McKenna on the joy of manhood. And it would help if I gave you a mic.
Good morning, everybody. It's an honor to speak to you this morning about the joy of manhood. I'll be very brief because I got a little carried away at the 9 o'clock service. We're from Chicago, grew up in Chicago, and lived in a bungalow on the northwest side of the city that sprawled over a 30-foot by 100-foot lot and included a garage and a front yard and a backyard, and was filled with grandfather, great aunt, mother, father, and brother, and one very small bathroom. But we thought of it as South Fork and enjoyed it, and walked to school, played a lot, and what I remember about being joyful in Chicago as a child is summertime. And I remember our mother would feed us in the morning and then politely show us to the door and tell us to disappear until 5 o'clock and enjoy ourselves. And we took our bikes and our swimming trunks and our baseball equipment, threw it in the basket, and headed off to Portage Park, where we had a big Olympic pool and a diving pool and tennis courts and baseball diamonds, and we fooled around all day long with our posse out there. And what I remember is the joy of being completely free and being able to pursue anything that we fancied and liked, anything that made us happy. But life has a way of interrupting joy like that, and high school came along, and I was sent to a special technical high school in Chicago called Lane Tech that has 5,000 boys, 5,000 Chicago boys in the same place at the same time all day long. And that school was filled with different kinds of shops. It had a print shop and a machine shop and an aircraft shop and a forge and a foundry. And it was decorated. It wasn't decorated with murals that celebrated the ethnic and religious diversity of the 5,000 boys. It was decorated with murals that showed men working in shipyards and slaughterhouses and machine shops and automobile assembly plants, and it was very, very Spartan-like. And in order to enforce discipline in a place with kids like this, you had to be at a specific place every minute of the day. And if you were disruptive in class or you were found wandering the halls, you were sent to the school disciplinarian, who was named Mr. Ehrlichman. And Mr. Ehrlichman had a big carnation as a boutonniere, a fresh carnation, different color every day. And you would appear before him, and he would look you up and down, and he would say, "What seems to be the problem today?" And you would tell your side of the story. And Mr. Ehrlichman would ignore everything you said and immediately sentence you to some draconian punishment, and you were sent back to class. So one day, I became disenchanted with this environment and decided to take the Addison Street bus, which ran in front of the school, east instead of west toward home. And after about 10 minutes, in front of the bus was Wrigley Field. And I thought to myself, that's where Wrigley Field is. And then another 15 minutes down the road, Lake Michigan appeared. And that's how I learned that Chicago was on Lake Michigan. So it occurred to me that you can't explore if you're not free. And if you can't explore, you don't know what joy you're missing. So I began to slowly come to the conclusion that joy for me was inextricably tied to freedom, because freedom allowed you to explore. So I began to seek out opportunities to be free and explore new places, and ended up spending most of my adult life outside the country in the Far East and in Europe. And my boss or client was at least 8,000 miles away. international communications were primitive by today's standards. We had teletypes and devices that would transmit a paragraph after about 2 hours of work. And so we were basically free to do whatever needed to be done, and you were unsupervised and you were uninterfered with, while you were able to explore different cultures, traditions, religions, etc. And I thought, joyful, joyful. Now, I never understood why I enjoyed exploration so much, especially in completely foreign environments. And I looked at my colleagues and friends who did not share that to the same extent I did, and I had never understood why until I came to Unity. And Unity taught me that I am a perfect son of my divine mother and father, and that I'm fully equipped to deal with any possible contingency here, there, or anywhere, and that I'm a divine creation. And when that penny finally dropped, I understood the real joy of manhood. I'm completely free and fully empowered to pursue everything and anything that makes me happy. Thank you.
Thank you, Kerry. I love that story about finding Lake Michigan by accident. That's such a great story. So now I'm going to invite Jeffry Myers up. You want to come all the way up, and let's welcome Jeffry as he talks about creativity.
Good morning. The creative side of me likes to think of life as a self-portrait that you create, right? All the years of your life, consciously or otherwise. And that has been the case, but the exploration that Kerry talked about and the freedom surrounding that was innately instilled in me, and so the traditional 9-to-5 life that my father and parents led never looked good to me. I had no role models, mentors, teachers, heroes, etc. at home, so I sought them elsewhere. My father had 5 marriages, was a workaholic, so there's no intimacy. He told other people that he really liked me and the things that I did, but he never told me. So I was challenged by that, and when I graduated from college, I decided I wanted to go to graduate school and get a Master of Fine Arts. That was verboten. He did not like that idea at all, because how do artists make any money? They're always poor and starving and all the rest of it. In fact, he said once when I showed him my portfolio that got me into graduate school, he said, "Beauty to me is pictures of apples hanging on a tree." So he lived in Wenatchee. I could understand the reference. So anyway, off I went to Ohio to graduate school, and pulling my little Volkswagen Bug, pulling a one-wheel trailer and 2 very heavy sound speakers. They were so big in the day. So anyway, I picked up a Master of Fine Arts while I was there, and I ran the Boston Marathon in under 3 hours. And the athletic side of me still reigns, because I exercise about an hour and a half a day, including running up the Columbia Tower every year for the big climb donation for the leukemia and lymphoma people. So in the last 4 years, my focus creatively has been on creating, blending images together using obviously my cameras and Photoshop and my computer, and doing something that Karen said has never been done before. So one of those is in the lobby. There's one going up shortly over the fireplace. And I love that whole idea. Along with all this artistic progress in the estrangement with my father that was quite lengthy, I looked for the answers to my great curiosity that said, what is everything about? Why are we here? There must be something to do that I'm not doing and that I wasn't taught. And so I kept looking, and I found New Thought 3 decades ago, and I just knew it was really important for my own spiritual and my mental and et cetera growth. So I grabbed it on, and I'm so proud to be a member of this church for the last 8 years. And I will continue to serve and progress. What the men's fellowship group does when we get together, we talk about things that really matter. Our monthly meetings and the retreat coming up next month. So invaluable to me. Even it's the Center for Spiritual Living, where I was for 24 years. I did not, we never had the connection that we have here at the level at which we share. So it's really, really meaningful to talk about legacies and destinies and love and relationships and how they contribute to our overall growth. So I invite you to keep sharing your passions and your compassions, taking your creative choices. It can be in the kitchen. It could be anywhere that you do your creativity. Thank you.
And so now we're going to hear from Carl Wostwin about being a father. He wrote a poem, and I'm sure he'll tell you about it, but he wrote a poem to his son when he graduated from college, and it speaks to the idea of what it's like to be a man today. So welcome, Carl.
Karen. So like Kerry, I grew up in Chicago on the northwest side, and I didn't go to Portage Park because I went to Central Park, which was the entire block in front of my house. And we could do almost all the things, but we didn't have the swimming pool. And at the far edge of Central Park, I could go to Addison Avenue, which ran in front of Lane Tech, and I could smell the bus fumes, which I loved, and my mother hated that I did. And like Jeffrey's father, I don't always say the things to my son that I would like to say. Something sideways comes out sometimes. So my son graduated from college last month, and we went out to Boston for the ceremony, and this poem is about that ceremony, and it's called Sam Graduated College Today. Lines of folding chairs circle the green, converging on the stage. The sun drenches us in honey light, and the trees hold the edge in cool green shade. The band pumps us up with pomp and circumstance and winds us down with it's a gift to be simple. We are here to celebrate the graduates. My son is launching at a stunning time. Seas rise and change. Plants and animals disappear. People struggle for food and a roof, while so few hold so much. Our president is African American. Our mayor gay. Our senators, chief of police, and minister are women. The commencement speaker, a woman, admonishes the male graduates to hold as strong a focus on family as on career. The female graduates are challenged to reach for dreams and not assume they are the caregivers for children. A young white man was once the chosen, but times are changing. This can be a sobering vision or a refreshing opportunity. Avoiding change is not an option. But Sam is 22, ready for adventures, not family, not yet. So son, here is my mini commencement talk to you. Dig deep into your masculine and find your perfect male way of loving. Open your heart to the world and use it to love yourself too. Be a supportive presence for the women in your life. Stay connected with your family and friends and community. Find new ways to have adventures, ways that keep the planet a happy place. Live lightly on the earth. If you are a father, spend more time with your child than I spent with you. The boat may rock and the world turn upside down, but you are always the chosen one in the eyes of God. You have a special role, a role written to your particular talents. Find it, occupy it. It is a perfect fit for you, using all of your male energy wisely. Love, abide in the world, and you will be a blessing in everything you do. Love, Dad.
And now Joseph Zahn is going to talk about the wisdom he learned from his father. So let's welcome Joseph Zahn.
Thanks, Karen. Well, I just wanted to show you what I found in the back of my closet, this suit here. My wife pointed out it's not just for weddings and funerals. You can actually dress up once in a while for Unity, too. So here I am. That's one of the most difficult things about going last is the fellows set a pretty high standard, and so don't judge me too harshly if I don't measure up to them. I just wanted to share a few things that I learned from my father about being an honorable man. For better or worse, our fathers were one of the most important early influences in our life. From the innumerable good things that they modeled and shared to maybe upsetting tendencies that we want to modulate to have a successful life, they set a role model for us. When Michael Bogar was here a couple weeks ago, he emphasized if we are fortunate, we will experience all three aspects of engaged father relationships: nurturing and caring, challenging and conflictual, and dark and antagonistic. This was certainly true with my interactions with my father, Joe. Among the qualities he felt comprised an honorable man were the following: be a person of your word. Commitment, loyalty, and responsibility, part of keeping your word. His hierarchy was God, family, country, and employer. He stayed with my mother, Lucille, for the 50 years before he died. And all the time and resources they had pretty much were devoted to the children that they brought into the world. He did feel if any of us were unfortunate enough to be divorced, that being a person of your word was to support your former spouse and children financially, emotionally, as best you could. It's part of keeping your word. If we were on a ball team and we didn't like our teammates or coach, felt like quitting, he said, you finish the season, then you can decide if you want to do this anymore. But you gave your word, you finished the season. He also said, do your best. Don't be afraid to make a mistake, and live without regrets. Good advice from a self-critical perfectionist who often was very hard on himself and occasionally on us, but he really was very supportive of us if we did our best and were prepared, even regardless of the outcome. You know, as long as you were prepared, did your best, that's all you could hope for. Another thing I really admired by him, he said, our religion is how we live. It's not just our words, it's really our actions and our deeds. He was a devout Catholic and loved that way of living, yet he had to admit that some people who came into the church with him were not particularly upstanding human beings. And grudgingly, he had to admit that there were a number of people who never set foot in a church who did a lot of good and made the world a better place. Despite our limited financial resources, he gave quite a bit of money to charity, was involved with St. Vincent de Paul's, the Good Shepherd Center for young women who got pregnant, and they have a safe haven until they had their child. And my wife and I have tried to do some things where we supported young people with their educational and living expenses, and reached out a little bit across the sea to Kiva Microloans and Children International to support a few families who are trying to get on their feet. Dad felt we should make time for family and friends. He really felt that family and health is much more valuable than fame and wealth. And he encouraged me to be a good man rather than a great man. And by that, I think he meant be known by your family and friends, respected by them, and be a good presence rather than writing a book or being nationally well known. He always said, be available whenever someone needs your help, anytime, day or night, and provide assistance as needed, and be humble enough to ask for assistance when you're feeling vulnerable or overwhelmed as part of being an honorable man. And when I was in 8th grade, my father asked me for a loan of about $23,000 in today's money to help the family pay some bills because we were struggling at the time. And when he was dying of cancer, he called me up and said he needed kind of a shoulder to cry on and someone to help him through that transition period. And I was glad he did reach out those couple of times. It was very hard for a person who was so independent and wanted to say he did it on his own. Based upon his upbringing and challenging life experiences, my father could be quite demanding, but he did feel if you had clear, focused goals and were willing to pay the dues, you could achieve nearly anything you set your mind to. As a poor West Virginia boy who went into the service because he couldn't afford college and yet was a decorated veteran, came out of that, maintained his devotion to the church throughout his life, 50-year run with my mother, had many children and grandchildren they're very proud of, and it wound up, instead of being a brain surgeon, which he had the ability to do, he wound up being an aeronautical engineer because it was a much shorter course of study so he could support the family. And as the aeronautical engineer, my dad wound up being on the NASA Apollo project when they went to the moon. So it was quite a step out of Cowtown, West Virginia to the Apollo project. Dad did set the bar pretty high as far as what being an honorable man meant, and I hope that he's proud of the man I've become. Thank you.
So I want to thank Joseph and Kerry and Carl and Jeffrey for sharing your wisdom and your expressions of the joy of manhood and fatherhood and creativity. Thank you so much. Before I call the ushers forward, I'd like to point out that you have some paper in your bulletin.